Welcome back in, everybody, to Pro Football Plus. It is always a pleasure to have you guys on board with us, guys and girls, wherever you're watching from. United States, around the planet somewhere, thank you for being on board, whether you're new or you've been here with us the entire time. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We're going to do a little bit of Super Bowl talk. It won't be super deep because I know after 2 weeks of looking forward to this big game, literally everything that could be talked about has been talked about. Okay. I mean, quarterbacks, coaches, coordinators, X factors, special teams, the referees, the color of the Gatorade. I mean, everything is going to be talked about somewhere on media during these 2 weeks. So we're not trying to do a deep hash, but out of respect for the fact that there is a big game going on, we did want to do a Super Bowl preview. And for those of you who want to get our last thoughts on the coaching hires as well, that'll be at the end of this show. Real quick, though, before we get into that, Austin, you got an interesting episode out this week on Tricky Takes. It even had a new wrinkle to it. So tell everybody, not just the one spot, but the two spots where they can hear it and see it this time.
Oh yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, we did our best sports moments of 2024, and we decided to go full out on it and did it with video. So if you want to check it out and see it with the clips, check it out on YouTube. It's on the Box Scores channel. If you just want to hear the audio version, that's on our normal Tricky Takes podcast channel. But best moments of 2024 in the sports world. We had a lot of fun recording it.
Full disclosure, Austin, I've listened to it, but I haven't yet had time to get over to YouTube and see it. But even just the calls on the air in my ear, really, really enjoyed that. So appreciate the extra work there, and I encourage everybody to go over and check that out because it really is worth the time. All right, Super Bowl matchup is here. It's the Chiefs. It's the Eagles. We're going to run through some stats real quick. I did not have time, and I don't even think it's super necessary for us to put together a huge advanced stat page, but I did want to kind of give everybody in the audience a feel for what's going down with these two teams. So I'll run through some of these statistics really quickly, and then I'll turn it over to the panel of guys here tonight, both Shane and Austin, and get their input here on some of the trends we're seeing. So first of all, we're going to start over here on offense on the right side of the screen here for everybody. Chiefs and Eagles both points per game. A matter of fact, let's just start with the Eagles here. I mean, it's all green here for the Eagles except for one category. All right, they're seventh in points per game. They are sixth in offensive EPA. They're eighth in yards per game. So no matter how you slice it, this offense is up there and it's producing. You get to the passing yards per game, and no secret here that we're not uncovering anything that everybody doesn't already know. On 29th in passing yards per game, that was way down. And the reason the offense is so good, though, number two in the league, rushing yards per game. Saquon Barkley, of course, killing it from any way you want to measure the rushing game. They're doing it. Turnovers given up, the Eagles are seventh. They don't turn the ball over a whole lot in the red zone. A little bit worse than I expected, actually. They're 12th. Still not bad, but not quite as aces as I thought they would be. And then how many penalty yards did they give up? They're only fifth. They do not generally do a lot of things to beat themselves on penalties. All right. Chiefs on offense. It's all brown. All right. Except for the turnovers. The Chiefs have been a regular, average, mediocre offense all year. They've been good for anywhere from 20 to 24 points a game. You can see that right here. They're about 15th on the whole year. Offensive EPA is 11th, yards per game 17th, passing yards per game 14, rushing yards per game down toward the bottom end. Really, I could have even put them in red if I wanted to, but 22nd in the league. They don't commit a lot of turnovers, fourth, red zone just 22nd, and penalty yards 11th. I mean, there's nothing impressive here statistically when you just kind of look at the overview, the raw numbers here on the Chiefs offense. But it has produced this year, and when needed to, they've been able to score and compete and win, obviously. On the defensive side of the ball, it's all green for the Eagles again. When you look at their defensive numbers here, second in points per game allowed, second defensive EPA, first in yards per game allowed, first in passing yards per game allowed, only 10th in rushing yards per game allowed, still pretty good. Sixth in how many turnovers they generate as a defense, and fifth in red zone defense. I mean, it's just statistically, it's tremendous what the Eagles have done. And don't forget, they didn't even start the year out that way. They kind of had a slow first month, and then just went on a binge. So I mean, if you were to take just say the last 3 quarters of the season, they might even be first or second in almost every category. That's how hot they were to drag themselves up here. Chiefs really good, just not quite that good from a statistical standpoint. They're fourth in points per game allowed, 18th in defensive EPA, ninth in yards per game allowed, 18th in passing yards per game allowed, eighth in rushing yards per game allowed, 14th in turnovers generated, and a pretty solid 10th there in red zone. All right. I raced through a whole bunch of statistics there, and that's a pile of them. Shane, I'm going to get your impulse first. It can be on these statistics, something else you've pulled out, or just a general trend here. But what's important to you just looking at these two teams here coming into this game?
I mean, I think the thing that has changed Philly is definitely the rush yards per game. Both sides of it. I think they're built to stop the run defensively. Drafted well to bring in some defensive backs to make it so it's a more even defense than what it had been in years past. But I think if Philadelphia plans on winning this game, it's Saquon Barkley on first and second down, and then hopefully you're back on first down again. I think Philly plans on running the ball as much as they possibly can. And, when you take a look at the Chiefs defense, they still match up well against that. Chris Jones, some of the other guys, Karlaftis, still do a great job of covering that run game, even though they're really trying to get some more sack and pressure in there. But I think it starts up front for both of these teams. And I think it will be interesting to see how Philly's offensive line attacks some of the blitz packages and movement that Spagnuolo loves to put in there.
We're going to get more of that matchup stuff here in just a minute. Before we do, Austin, trend wise, stat wise, I mean, you are like the king of kings in terms of statistical analysis. So, what are you feeling here on this game as we look across this kind of broad sweep here of statistics?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the defenses, these are two really solid groups on defense, where there's not necessarily a hole on either defense. As you can see, the Eagles are
Yeah.
really solid everywhere else, and the Chiefs are either really solid or kind of average. So there's not necessarily a hole in either of these teams' defenses, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how these offensive coordinators and Andy Reid, kind of dial up the offenses and pick what they're going to try and attack on these defense because you've got to kind of pick something, especially on crucial third downs of like what you're going to go for. And there's not necessarily a glaring hole to take a aim at, but
I
it
will
makes
say, yeah, sorry. One
it
thing
makes it
that's,
even more creative.
yes, I mean, exactly. And I don't know how much of, I mean, they're going to need it. But what stood out to me here as I looked at all these statistics here, if I took the name Chiefs and Eagles off of here and I didn't know who these two teams were, I just looked at them analytically, it would look like, from a statistical analysis standpoint, that I had a super team here on offense and another super team here on defense, and they're both the same team. I mean, when you just look at the stats, it's how wildly confusing football can be sometimes because in the Chiefs' case, you've got the best quarterback in the game and maybe, well, one of the best coaches in the game, if not the best. But that's how much it can skew. Because when you look over here at this team right here, if we didn't know that was the Chiefs, it's a very pedestrian offense statistically, and it's a pretty good defense statistically, but doesn't hold up to the other side. It would look like a super team versus a pretty decent team is what it would look like, and yet the Chiefs are just as dangerous and just have a tremendous chance to win this game. Statistically, it is not always easy to analyze these things at the NFL level. All right, let's do a little bit of matchups here. And again, I said we weren't going to go super deep, but we're going to go kind of deep. All right, we're going to get both guys' thoughts here on one thing that they'll be looking for when the Eagles are on defense and when the Chiefs have the football. Okay, so we've got the Eagles defense up here, no names, just kind of the helmet look here. Got the Chiefs offense up. Shane, I'm going to go to you first here. When the Eagles are on defense, what's one thing matchup wise somewhere here on the field that you're looking at?
I think it starts right up the middle. It's going to be how the Chiefs decide to attack Jalen Carter. Um, he is really the keystone of that defense. He allows Zach Bond to be able to move around and be free back there, which has led to a resurgence in his career, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think that it also lets those defensive backs play a little bit looser than what they had in years past as well. But
Yes.
for Jalen Carter, he's going against one of the premier centers in the league, a quality guard. And if they didn't have to move Tooney to tackle, he probably would have been playing against the three best two guards and one center that he could have asked for.
Yeah.
And for them to have to move Tooney out to tackle, I think is going to help Jalen Carter. And I think that's something they're going to have to look into.
I agree. I think that's a rough one there if you're the Chiefs, right? And listen, both teams have things you can identify. But if I were to just switch Carter over here, and of course he's going to get double teamed the heck out of him. But still, when you're looking at Carter and Caliendo here, I mean, I don't know that there's a worse mismatch on the field anywhere, right? Now, listen, they're not going to let Caliendo line up here by himself. They're going to be all kinds of double teams here, but still, if you were going to identify a green and a red 1-on-1, that's a rough one there for the Chiefs, Shane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I get it, and I think it's hats off to Tooney for taking that step out to play tackle.
Yeah.
It was needed for them, but just like you said, Ben, you're then putting your, I don't know, maybe seventh best lineman against the top defensive threat for the Eagles. I think that puts you in a very tough position. Like you said, I'm sure it's going to be double teams all day, but with Tooney against Carter, you could have had some times where they gave him the single matchup and maybe Creed Humphrey just kind of bunched him a little bit to get a push or a pump when they were trying to go for a pass. But I think this time Creed Humphrey is going to that's going to be his number one, is protecting on that side. And I think this could be a huge game blitz wise for Zach Bond. I think that the Eagles are going to try to mix some things up. And I
Yeah.
think when you're trying to cover the premier defensive tackles that they're going to go against. And the other thing for the Eagles, the last time that these two teams played, this defensive Eagles, their defensive line was much older. This is a young defensive line, and that they're going to be chomping at the bit to try to get something going.
They are, and the unfortunate thing for Kansas City is, even though I agree it was probably the right move to get Tooney out here, I think Mahomes just feels more comfortable with Tooney out here at tackle. Honestly, it's just kind of a comfort level. But even so, you'll still see the Chiefs every game and all throughout this game having a wide receiver just kind of here chipping on the edge. They'll run a running back over here to chip on the edge. They'll have a tight end sitting here to chip on the edge. I mean, they can't let Tooney loose because he's not a purebred stone cold tackle either. He's a guard who's so good that they could put him out there to tackle and make it more efficient for everybody. But still, man, you kind of the whole line is still weakened because of how they've had to do everything here. So that's not a great matchup for Kansas City, even though I don't think it's as bad as what they had in the Tampa Bay Super Bowl where they just switched everybody around. They're missing both tackles, kind of heading into the Super Bowl there. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Austin, we got the board up. Eagles defense up here, man. What are you feeling?
So one thing I've noticed in my deep dive into this game is that the Chiefs run the second most 12 personnel in all of football on offense. That's one running back, two tight ends.
Yep.
And 12 personnel is actually the weakest that the Eagles defend. They defend 12 personnel worse than they do 11 personnel or any other personnel that you see. And the Chiefs are going to be in 12 personnel a lot. They usually are, and I expect that number to be hiked up and exaggerated. I think normally they run it around a third of the plays. I would be surprised if it's less than like 40% this game. I think they're going to really lean into that. And obviously, game script kind of dictates this as well. But if everything's going the way they want it to, they're going to want to be in 12 personnel a lot. And I'm interested to see how that kind of opens up Andy Reid's playbook, because 12 personnel is really conducive to a lot of different schemes, and you can run pretty much anything out of it. So, interested to see where they go on that.
I agree. And listen, I think that gets doubly because that's on the whole season. I think
Mhm.
that has gotten doubly important since N'Kobe Dean went down. And now you've got
Yes.
a backup linebacker in here. And we saw the last couple of weeks, the Eagles were giving up a lot of yards to the tight end spots over the middle here. So yeah, so we I mean everybody knows about Kelsey, but yeah, the 12 personnel I think that's a great matchup for Kansas City here. Yeah. And so, a little bit of give back here, maybe where you're losing it on the defensive versus the offensive line. They're going to get some back here. I didn't actually even know that about the 12 personnel from being the most in the league that they ran it, but that's great. And man, they've been kind of doing that for 2 or 3 years now, ever since they lost both tackles during I think the 21-22 offseason. They've really had to amp up the tight ends to chip on the tackles who can't block edge rushers. So, but they lean into that. They are brilliant at that. My little bit here that I want to talk about and look for when the Eagles are on defense. The Eagles love to do this shell defense. I mean, they do it more than anybody. So you're looking at three, cover four, three safety, four safety. Nobody does it more than the Eagles. Okay, they run a lot of deep stuff, so they like to have their four guys here. They will put in a fifth guy if they have to. They did late in the Rams game. They don't like to do that. They like to have 2 to 3 linebackers. If it's 2 linebackers, then Cooper DeJean is hanging out right here, just kind of stuffing somebody at the line. But they love to keep guys deep. Even if they bring in the cornerbacks, they still have two safeties deep. All right. They love to keep everything in front and just move down, right? Move downhill, keep it front, move down. And they're so smart at that, they're able to still limit what you can do, even though you're grabbing all this short stuff. Well, Austin, I think you mentioned it on the show earlier this week or early last week. The Chiefs all year have just been slice and dice, short stuff. I mean, it's passing out here to Worthy on the sideline for 5 yards. I mean, it's a little nook in here for another 3 or 4 yards. It's Kelsey right here for a little 8 yards. I mean, that's all they do, you know? It's slice and dice and little hooks and stuff. And I mean, that's it. So, what I'm interested to see is will the Eagles be able to stay in this shell or will they have to bring all the cornerbacks up? They tend to play off a lot. Now, again, they're good at that. They're smart at recognizing patterns and limiting, but still, if the Chiefs are moving the ball and picking up first downs and being patient, which the Chiefs have learned to do, Mahomes learned to do that 2 years ago, are they going to have to start bringing up these defensive backs here? And then is that going to open up the middle of the field even more than what we've already talked about? So I'm curious to see. They're not going to bring down these two safeties at all, but I'm curious to see these two defensive backs where they like to leave them back up here somewhere. Are they going to be able to do that the whole game, or is Kansas City just going to have so many long drives and first downs and chew it up and still score touchdowns where the Eagles are going to have to move up here? So that's the one thing I'm looking for here on top of everything else we've already mentioned. All right, that's excellent work. We're going to shift gears now. Change of possession. We're going to put the Chiefs on defense and the Eagles on offense. I know where I'm going, but I'll wait for last. Austin, I'm going to let you go first here. What do you want to see when the Eagles are on defense and the Chiefs are trying to stop them?
Okay, so this one gets weird. And it's back to kind of a personnel and formation thing. The Eagles run the second most amount of 2-by-2. And so what this means is just like you have it on the, well, I guess technically there'll be 3-by-2, but it's when you have
Yeah.
two receivers on one side of the formation, two receivers on the other side of the formation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, yeah, there you go. So
Clear
in
that
a
up a little bit.
2-by-2 formation, the Eagles love this formation. They run it offensively as much as anybody in the league. And the Chiefs are actually really susceptible against the pass in 2-by-2 formations. I don't necessarily know what it is. They defend the rush pretty well against 2-by-2, but for some reason, when teams are passing in a 2-by-2 set, the Chiefs just seem to give up a bunch of yards. And I don't know how much the Eagles are going to lean into this because obviously, as you mentioned, like they want to run the ball, like that's kind of their bread and butter.
Yeah.
But if they get behind in the game and they have to start throwing the ball, this is probably the formation they're going to try it out. This is what we're going to see most often, and Chiefs could get burned on it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's very good that they run that 2-by-2 form so much and that the Chiefs struggle with it. I might could have figured that out based on what I've seen this year, but I didn't actually know that. So that's very good here. Shane, I'm gonna roll to you here. Chiefs on defense, Eagles trying to score. What are you looking at?
I mean, I hate to be the one that keeps on going back to this, but I think this game is up front on both sides. I think it's going to be Chris Jones, and then the other part, I think, and actually Austin played into it because I think this 2-by-2 conversation comes up with this. A lot of the film that I've seen is that when they're in that 2-by-2 in passing situations, Spagnola tends to release one of those safeties as his additional rusher. So sometimes that ends up going back into like a cover three, and then you're susceptible to all the short yardage passing game underneath that, especially with the 2-by-2 sets. It's a lot of rub and pick you can set up out of those to cover those different angles. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Kansas City mixes up their pressure. Um, I think with the way the run game plays for Philadelphia, the worry for Kansas City is that you fit for the run over and over again, and Hurts pulls it back, and you get like a Dallas Goddard or AJ Brown breaks free. So I think you've got to be careful with how you mix up your pressure so that you're not leaving space too far behind.
Yeah, I agree, and I especially like the point about the underneath stuff being available when they're dropping into cover three, which of course, but you don't really think of the Chiefs doing cover three that much, but they kind of have to when they're bringing the extra heat because they can't just go mano a mano all the time. I hate to be obvious here, but I'm gonna do it because it really is to me the thing I'm worried about, interested in. It's Barkley. What is Spagnuolo going to do to maybe not stop Saquon, but limit the damage because he has damaged almost everybody else in the league this year. What are they going to do? And you already mentioned it. Spagnuolo loves to bring the heat. Second in passing, third in passing, he's coming. So they love to just they love to threaten. They'll bring in these linebackers here or safety and just have all these guys sitting here, and they're not bringing the ball, but they're having it all sitting there as a threat. Then they're going to go back out of it in a lot of cases and just to try to confuse you. But in the midst of all that heat that you're bringing and secondary talk that you're doing, man, you've got a force of nature right here in Saquon Barkley who could just punch you. He can punch you up the gut, but he loves to just run right through here and off into the races he goes. So what is what is uh what is Spagnuolo going to do? And I don't really have a great suggestion for it, to be honest. But what is he going to do to slow down Barkley when usually he's kind of interested in confusing the quarterback, hurrying the quarterback, intimidating the quarterback? I don't know that that's going to be the problem here. The problem is going to be Barkley. So I'm curious to see what Spagnuolo comes up with to try to limit Barkley and keep that punch from being thrown. Any final thoughts here on the Super Bowl? Those are our matchups. We've covered both sides. Shane, any final thought here on the Super Bowl before we roll into one other segment this evening?
I think, like you said, Ben, the thing I'll be interested to see is Saquon Barkley. If he's ready to go and this offense is forceful, I think this could be very difficult for Kansas City to pull through. I don't think Kansas City's had to face one standout offensive player the way that Barkley's played this year.
Barkley's phenomenal. Shane, I'm going to come right back and get your Super Bowl pick here in a second. Austin, final thoughts on the game here as we kind of close down our coverage of it.
The Eagles have a real shot, and it's not just because of like their efficiency and stuff like that. A lot of people point out their strength of schedule was really, really weak this year, which kind of inflates their efficiency metrics and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
Don't get fooled by that. This is a legit offense and a legit defense. They have an actual shot at doing this. I think this is going to be a really entertaining game. These are two teams that are, I don't want to say like kind of expected to be here, but well, at least the Chiefs are definitely expected to be here. But these are two teams that we're not shocked that are here, right? So, I mean, I'm expecting this is a heavyweight fight. It's not some
Yes.
underdog. No.
I've got to say, even though I wasn't rooting for this matchup, I wanted to see Lions and Bills and Commanders and Ravens and all that. But I don't feel cheated here. You mentioned it, Austin. These are two teams that are heavyweights. They deserve to be here. I mean, I don't feel like I'm getting cheated out of a great matchup here at all. Shane, give me your Super Bowl pick, man.
So I think, like Austin said, Philadelphia has a real shot, and I'm going to go with them. I think the and I think it's more of a case of the weight that's on Kansas City to be a
Yeah.
three-time champion in a row. The losses they've had through free agency, the offense not being what it is normally. Um, I think Philadelphia also thinks about how, you know, I, with the play of people talking about officiating and things like that, I think Philly feels like they played on a terrible surface the first time they played and how much that cost them. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they attack the turf in New Orleans. But I think Philly wins this one. I think it's close though. I think Kansas City has a chance to win it at the end.
Give us a final score, too, Shane.
Ooh,
Vegas is listening.
yeah, I think it's going to be low, but I think
Okay.
I'll go 21-17.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Austin, give us your prediction and a score, man.
So there's an interesting stat that I know. I'm willing to share it with you all. It's very classified information, but this is what I do for the people.
Thank you.
No team has ever won the Super Bowl in the same year that they lost to a team started by with Kirk Cousins as their starting quarterback.
Oh,
And the Falcons and Kirk Cousins beat the Eagles 22 to 21 this year. And I think that trend
hmm.
is true, and I think it's going to stay true. I think Kirk Cousins is the bar. I think if you can't beat Kirk Cousins, you're not going to win the Super Bowl. That's just kind of life. So I'm going to go Chiefs here. And I'm going to go fairly low scoring, maybe a little bit more points than what Shane had. I'm going to say 24-21.
All right. All right. 24-21 Chiefs for Austin. I agree with y'all in spirit about the low scoring game. I picked higher only because I felt like these two teams might open it up in the fourth quarter of a close one. But I don't feel good about that based on the scores y'all are telling me here. But anyway, I'll stick with the point total here. I've got the Chiefs winning. I still like Mahomes and Reed, and I still think the Chiefs have enough matchups to give the Eagles problems, even if Barkley goes off for one big one. So I think the Jalen Hurts factor here is a big problem for me. Not that I don't think he's bad by any stretch, but we just haven't seen anything consistent like what we saw out of him 2 years ago. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs 30-23. That sounds way higher scoring than I wanted it to be, but again, I'm thinking maybe fourth quarter we get some teams opening stuff up here. So, Shane, if you're right, you will win our competition straight out, and if not, then you and I will tie for the title, and we'll have to. I don't know. We can't have co-title winners, so we'll have to figure out a tiebreaker or something. Okay, Shane?
Okay.
I mean, it's just closest than point total there, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. Is that okay, Shane?
I like that.
Closest point total. We'll see how that works out. Okay. We got one final segment tonight. Might even be the segment that a lot of y'all turned up for. Okay. We covered in pretty good detail 2 or 3 times this year already the head coaches that we were looking at and the teams they might be going to. Well, most of the coaching hires have happened. I've already got Kellen Moore penciled in here for the Saints because it's gone death quiet. And I feel like what we're hearing from the media is that that's because they're just waiting until the Super Bowl is over to make that announcement. But anyway, Pete Carroll to the Raiders, Schottenheimer to the Cowboys, Vrabel to the Patriots, Ben Johnson latches on to Chicago, Aaron Glenn with the Jets, Liam Cohen through one way or another ends up in Jacksonville as their head coach. we could talk about so many things. Brian Flores doesn't look like he's going to get a shot this year. Joe Brady pulled out of the, I think it was the Saints thing. I think that he pulled out of. So he's not going to be head coach this year. Dion, I left Pete Carroll in here. Todd Monken, Spagnuolo. Looks like these guys are going to be back in their normal jobs for the next season. You can even talk about coordinators if you want to. Shane, got a whole bunch of things we can talk about here, but what's something that really stood out to you?
I would say first the Liam Cohen entire saga stood out to me, but I think Jacksonville made a good decision. We've talked that I don't trust Trent Baalke, and I think it's helpful for them that that's what he said. Like it's either him or I, and they made that
Yeah.
move. So I think that helps the Jaguars as a total. The one that surprised me the most, and it probably shouldn't based on who the owner is, but for the Dallas Cowboys to pick Schottenheimer to be your next head coach when you had other opportunities makes me think that, all these other coaches said there's no way that I want to be the head coach under Jerry Jones. Um, Totally underwhelming to have that as your pick, especially with, the list of people that are still on the board that, haven't had an opportunity yet to even turn down a Cowboys job, surprises me. I think the teams that have gone out and made their picks, I think they did well. I think Aaron Glenn, I don't think the Jets are going to turn around, but I think he's the type of person you needed in that. The one I think is most interesting out of this group is Pete Carroll. I liked Pete Carroll. One of our shows in the very beginning when we talked about coaching possibilities, I said if you couldn't talk Ben Johnson into it as a Bears head coach, I would have gone for Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll, if he can get a quarterback with the Raiders, that's going to be a very interesting setup. Um, Players enjoy playing for Pete Carroll. He's a defensive mind. He went out and got, I didn't like Chip Kelly as a head coach in the NFL. I think maybe as an OC, this opens up some opportunities for you. But I also think that if you had gone in a different way for head coaching, somebody like Max Crosby is looking for a way out, like Myles Garrett is in Cleveland. And I
Right.
think by having Carroll and somebody like that with that personality, a good pickup by the Raiders, I think.
Austin, I'm not going to ask you to comment on Pete Carroll because I already know that you just didn't want Carroll pretty much anywhere, not because he's incapable, but just because of hey, this probably isn't a great long term solution. But where do you want to talk at here? Even go coordinators if you want. I'm gonna hit up a coordinator here in a second. There's so much to talk about, but what stood out?
I do think Chip Kelly to the Raiders is worth mentioning because this Raiders offense is absolutely nothing like what Chip Kelly typically does. Chip Kelly loves to have speed on the outside and beef in the middle, and he likes to say, "Good luck covering our super fast wide receivers. We're going to burn you, so you better kind of spread out." And then once you do that, he just pounds the ball up the middle, runs a ton of inside zone, things like that. And that is not at all what the Raiders' current roster is set up to do. So I'm intrigued to see how they draft because I think Chip Kelly is going to want a big, beefy running back or some speed on the outside. Um, Moving on from that, though, I don't know how I feel about the Saints getting Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's really surprised me this year with what he's been able to do. I don't know how nice he's going to be as at the tip top at the head coach. I do
Right.
think he's a fine coordinator. I think you're going to surround him with a lot of um, sort of veteran coordinators and quarterback coaches and tight end coaches and things like that. And I haven't looked at who all they're looking at for those kind of positions, but that's going to be tough. Whatever it's not a great position. I know you've talked about it ad nauseum, Ben, but like the Saints position right now is just one of the least desirable in football because of the cap
Yeah.
situation and your quarterback situation and everything like that. So I think that's interesting. And then finally, Liam Cohen. I don't know what that says about him doing this because the way he got there wasn't necessarily the most professional, I would say.
Right.
And so I don't know if that's kind of the guy I want to be my head coach, the guy who would act that way and sort of be a little mysterious and untruthful. I don't know if that's the guy I want, leading my ship. So that's my thoughts on that.
I love all of that, but especially your insight on Kelly there. That's excellent, talking about what he likes to do traditionally versus what the Raiders are currently set up to do. But they got to build something up anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully they'll draft in that direction and do some matching there. I'm with you guys. I don't hate Schottenheimer as a dude, but I mean, if you're a Cowboys fan, how uninspiring can that be? Kellen Moore again, fine as a coordinator, but yeah, currently uninspiring as a head coach. But I mean, did the Saints really expect any better anyway? Because they got, I think, not one but two people that didn't even want to come back for second interviews. So no surprise there. I did say, and Shane, I think you alluded to this. I felt much better about this group of coaching hires in general than I usually do. Usually I'm split about half and half, but in general, I liked five of these head coaching hires. I thought they made good football sense to me. And then even the coordinators that some of these guys were bringing in, I thought a lot of those just made good sense this year. I didn't feel that I felt less like there were owners intruding and stuff and making weird decisions than I did that there were football people making good, solid football decisions this year. And again, not everybody can win. You can hire a good coach and still not win, and he'd be out in 3 or 4 years. Not everybody can win because 32 teams competing against each other. But I felt good. I liked the Carroll hire, the Vrabel hire, the Johnson hire, the Glenn hire, the Cohen hire. But I will say, Austin, you mentioned it. I didn't. I loved that Cohen leveraged out Balky. That needed to happen in Jacksonville, but going kind of dark on your team for 24 hours, the team that was willing to give you a lot of extra money to keep you, and then just kind of going dark and they couldn't reach you and didn't know where you were. I didn't like that part of it. That was a little sketchy right there. So that part of it, I wish he had been more forthcoming and honest and saying, hey guys, I just want a shot at a head coach. They got rid of the guy I didn't want to be there. So I really would appreciate you letting me head back down there and talk to them. Probably would have been a better way to handle that. We'll see if that shows up in his coaching or not. One final thought here. The guys that are left, uh, Shane and Austin, anybody here, and maybe not even on the board, maybe off the board, that you thought should have gotten a shot, or you just think, hey, this guy will be getting one real quick next year? Shane, you first.
I mean, the one that I was surprised, I thought Brian Flores showed what
Yeah.
he could turn around in Minnesota. I think it shows again, though. Anytime you legally go against the league, it is going to be difficult for you. The league doesn't necessarily blackball people, but it makes it known that, you better stick to the job you got because we're going to make it tough on an owner to be able to make a move for you. Um, I think, like you said, I would have been interested to see Dion. I think he made a right decision. I think right now for him in college, he has all the power. And going to the
Yeah.
pros, he would have lost a lot of that, decision making process. The ones that I think are kind of sad is, Spagnola doesn't get a shot. Todd Monken, guys that have put time in that you would have thought would have warranted at least a little bit more time on their end. It's tough when your team makes it farther in the playoffs. The way that the whole coaching cycle works is difficult for anybody once you're really solid. You take a look at like somebody like Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, people are going after them about how much did they concentrate on the playoff game they're in if they're having these
Yeah.
conversations. I mean, it's ridiculous at some point in the way it is. It puts against them, and you can't hurt these guys to have to be like, you've done well by your team. I'm not saying that these guys are just flying around, but nowadays you're doing Zoom calls, you're in your office. They're still spending
Yeah.
21 out of the 24 hours of the day on the football team. Let's not pretend that both of these guys decided to call it quits on the Lions.
No, agreed. And I really wanted to see Flores get a head coaching spot. I thought he deserved it, but I also think that he would be good at it. But he doesn't need to be with the Cowboys or the Saints. He's better off waiting another year if people are going to give him a shot than he would be to go there. So hopefully that whole league thing gets resolved. That kind of hopefully goes away over the next year or two, and hopefully he gets a shot here in a year or two to actually coach a decent situation. Austin, out of the guys that didn't get jobs this year, any special thought on any of them?
Well, first I gotta say Brian Flores, that dude's a bum. Nobody wants him. Everybody should just leave him alone.
Yes,
No, nobody, like he's just not worth
Quality
it.
reverse psychology.
Just let
yes.
him, yeah, just leave him alone, guys. Come
Just
on.
stay in Minnesota. Nobody else really wants you to come anywhere else, but stay
Right,
in
yeah,
Minnesota.
he's
Yeah.
undesirable. Okay, so really though, I think Todd Monken probably, and I talked about him a little bit a few weeks ago, I think. I really like what he does offensively. That doesn't make you a good head
Yeah.
coach, just flat out. It does not. We've
Right.
seen many coordinators who are very high quality go try and be a head coach and just flop.
Yep.
That being said, I think Monken has earned his shot at it. So I'm looking for him to be up next cycle next year and to get a few interviews and take a shot at a head coaching job. I don't know what's going to be available. It's hard to kind of predict that kind of stuff, but if there's one open and I'm an NFL team, I am looking at Monken heavily, I think.
I wouldn't be surprised. He has kind of worked his way up through a lot of different levels here, so I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't get some stronger looks next year. All right, time for our final 60. Shane, I'll let you go up first while I show everybody the friends of the network.
So for my final 60, kind of wrap up the college and move to the pro. Just want to give a shout out to both the Shrine Bowl and the Reese's. I think that those senior bowls, you get an opportunity to see, and for me, a lot of times I like to see the D2 guys, the FCS guys, D3 guys get a chance to play against there. I think the difference in talent has started to mitigate between those different ones. So it's less surprising now when you see a guy from a D3 school that has an opportunity to get picked in the fourth round. And the ability for people to see that type of thing. Also, some great stories out of the Senior Bowl this year with Beck. His brother unfortunately passes away during the tragedy in New Orleans. He goes on to have an outstanding Senior Bowl game. Really opened some eyes, and also opened some eyes about the skill level that his brother had when he was at Princeton. Two things that knocked out. And the one thing I did want to mention in my final 60, since I know Austin always movies and TVs, I watched Buddy's Way, which was about Buddy Stevens by the Manning family, put it together for ESPN. If you have an opportunity to see some of the things that Buddy Stevens did for the college coaching profession and the type of guy he was, an excellent documentary. Very tied in with the Mannings. He was the organizer for the Manning Passing Academy up until his death. And so if you're in that tight with that type of group, really tells you what type of college coaching. I mean, a standout really is what he was.
Shane, I love it. The title is Buddy's Way. It's a documentary, and where can we find it again?
It's on ESPN.
Okay.
You can catch it on like the ESPN Plus and any of those ones. I imagine pretty soon you'll get it. You'll be able to get it some other places, but it actually just previewed last week. So,
All right, awesome. Go check it out. Buddy's Way. Austin, your final 60 seconds.
So my final 60 was gonna go also to like the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl and getting to see all these kids for the first time. I think this is one of the most fun times, one of the most underrated times of the year, I guess, for a football fan. Especially this week with a Pro Bowl going on. You're like, there's nothing going on. There's something going on. It's draft season now. Like we have officially entered draft season. I'm beginning my player evaluations have just kicked off. I got Ben my grading sheet for the first time, so he's gonna be able to use my scoring system. Shane, if you are interested, I'll send you one too. But yeah, it's a really fun time as a football fan to get to look at these young men who are trying to make a career for themselves. And this is kind of the first look of best on best that we see, and it's really good.
Yeah. I'll do a programming up in a second. I got to say, though, I'm pretty sure whenever Austin goes to heaven someday, that he's just going to have a computer with a giant multiverse of Excel screens, and that's all he's going to do all day, just kind of next to the river of life or something, right? Austin, just yes. he
Just let me
listen
loose.
that that thing he sent me. I don't know which is sicker, the fact that he built it or the fact that I'm still deep diving into it and I love every part of it. All right, so it, it was fantastic. But you're right. Programming note coming up next week. We are going to do another free agent segment. We'll be talking about the front seven of the defense. So again, we can't have everybody. We don't even want to. We just want to give you a feel for if you're a fan or a GM, what's out there that you might could be interested in. So it'll be edge rushers, defensive tackles, linebackers, what's maybe sitting out there available in free agency that can help your team. And then we will also start with the Minnesota Vikings defense, breaking that down. The biggest thing they've got going for them is that Brian Flores is coming back to run it next year. We're going to break down the personnel, see where strengths and weaknesses are, and what we might like to do next week. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to roll right into a Vikings war room mock draft, 3 to 4 rounds, something like that. Austin will be the general manager for that particular episode. So thank you all for hanging with us. Got a lot of great stuff coming. Hang with us all during the off season. We are going to be loaded just as much as we are during the regular season. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.